In a small town in Georgia, where the streets were lined with old oak trees and everyone knew each other by name, there lived a woman who quietly went about her days serving meals to students at Jefferson High School. Her name was Dolores Thompson, but to most people she was simply the lunch lady. Every morning she'd arrive at school before sunrise, tying on her white apron and setting up trays of food for hundreds of hungry teenagers. To many, her job seemed ordinary, just another part of the daily routine they didn't think much about, but Dolores wasn't ordinary. She had warmth in her smile that could light up even the gloomiest Monday mornings. Students often joked around or teased her, calling out playful comments as they grabbed their trays. Some teachers would stop by during their breaks, chatting casually while sipping coffee. No one ever imagined that beneath her calm exterior lay a mind sharper than anyone realized. Mind capable of solving problems others deemed impossible. Jefferson High wasn't exactly thriving. The school building was old, its paint peeling, and resources were stretched thin. Teachers worked hard, but it felt like an uphill battle every day. One afternoon, Principal Harris called an emergency meeting in the auditorium. Everyone gathered, teachers, staff, even some parents, to hear what he had to say. His face looked tense as he stood behind the podium, gripping the sides tightly. "Folks," he began, his voice heavy with worry, "I've got some bad news. Unless we find a way to bring in more funding, this school will have to close within the next 6 months." Murmurs filled the room. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Closing the school? That couldn't happen. It was the heart of the community. But Harris wasn't done yet. He went on to explain that a local tech company had offered a challenge to all schools in the district. Whoever solved their impossible algorithm problem would win $500,000. It sounded promising, but there was a catch. The problem required advanced math and coding skills, things not everyone was equipped to handle. As soon as Harris finished speaking, the room erupted into chaos. Teachers exchanged worried glances. Some groaned audibly, shaking their heads. "This is ridiculous," one teacher muttered under their breath. "How are we supposed to do something like that?" Another chimed in, "We're educators, not computer scientists." The mood grew increasingly hopeless. Most people assumed the challenge was beyond them. Then, from the back of the room came a soft voice. "Maybe I can take a look at it." All eyes turned toward the speaker. It was Dolores, standing near the door, clutching a notebook in her hands. For a moment there was silence. Then someone snickered. Someone else outright laughed. "What? Does a lunch lady know about algorithms?" A teacher blurted out, earning chuckles from those nearby. Dolores felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't back down. Instead, she straightened her posture and met the gazes of the doubters head-on. "Principal." Harris cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to diffuse the tension. "Well, if you want to give it a shot, go ahead," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't think much of the idea either. Still, Dolores nodded firmly and accepted the packet containing the details of the challenge. As she walked away, she could hear whispers trailing behind her. "Can you believe that? She probably doesn't even understand what an algorithm is." Later that evening, Dolores sat alone at her kitchen table, staring at the papers spread out in front of her. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. She traced her fingers over the lines of numbers and symbols, feeling a mix of emotions swirling inside her. There was frustration, yes, but also determination and maybe even a little excitement. This was her chance to show everyone what she was truly capable of. Years ago, long before she became the lunch lady, Dolores had been known for her brilliance. She was the kind of student who aced every test without breaking a sweat. The one teachers praised for her quick thinking and creative problem-solving. Scholarships rolled in, and prestigious universities invited her to join their programs. But life took a different turn when she found out she was pregnant at 19. Suddenly, dreams of studying advanced mathematics gave way to the reality of raising a child. She chose stability over ambition, taking whatever job she could find to provide. For her family, decades passed, and Dolores never forgot her love for numbers. Late at night, after her kids were asleep, she'd sometimes pull out old textbooks and work through problems just for fun. Now, looking at the challenge before her, she realized it was like stepping back into a world she'd left behind, but one that still felt familiar. Slowly, deliberately, she started jotting down ideas, breaking the problem into smaller pieces. By the time midnight rolled around, she'd already made progress. Still, doubt lingered in the corners of her mind. What if she failed? What if everyone's laughter turned into outright mockery? These thoughts weighed on her, but she pushed them aside. Failure wasn't an option, not this time. If nothing else, she owed it to herself to try. And so, with renewed resolve, Dolores continued working, determined to prove that sometimes the most unexpected heroes come from the places no one bothers to look. The next morning, Dolores arrived at school as usual, pushing her cart of food down the cafeteria line. The smell of freshly baked bread and warm soup filled the air, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. While she served trays to students, her thoughts kept drifting back to the challenge. She'd spent hours the previous night poring over the problem, scribbling notes and testing theories in her head. Despite the complexity, something about it felt familiar, like revisiting an old friend after years apart. Between serving meals and wiping down tables, Dolores began jotting down ideas on scraps of paper. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she'd sketch diagrams or write equations on the back of napkins. Occasionally, a curious student would glance at her notepad and ask, "What's that?" But Dolores would just smile and say, "Oh, nothing important," brushing it off with a laugh. No one suspected that these random doodles were actually pieces of a much bigger puzzle. Word spread quickly around the school about Dolores' attempt to solve the algorithm challenge. At first, people found it amusing, a source of lighthearted gossip during lunch breaks. Teachers joked about it in the staff room. "Did you hear? The lunch lady thinks she can crack this thing," one of them said, chuckling. Another chimed in, "Well, good luck to her. Maybe she surprised us all." Their tone wasn't malicious, but it was clear they didn't take her seriously. Even Principal Harris seemed skeptical, though he tried to stay polite whenever the topic came up. Despite the teasing, Dolores refused to let it get to her. In fact, the more people doubted her, the more determined she became. Each snicker only fueled her resolve. She reminded herself why she was doing this, not for recognition or praise, but because she wanted to save the school. Jefferson High wasn't just a building. It was a second home to so many kids who relied on it for stability and opportunity. If solving this challenge meant keeping its doors open, then she'd do whatever it took. At home, Dolores worked tirelessly into the late hours of the night. Her living room became a makeshift office, cluttered with papers, books, and her trusty laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated her face as she typed away, teaching herself coding languages she hadn't touched in decades. It wasn't easy. There were moments when frustration threatened to overwhelm her. Lines of code wouldn't work, formulas didn't add up, and deadlines loomed closer with each passing day. But Dolores had always been resourceful. When she hit a roadblock, she turned to free online tutorials, watching videos until she understood the concepts. Slowly but surely, the pieces started coming together. One evening, as Dolores sat hunched over her laptop, her teenage granddaughter walked in. The girl lived nearby and often visited after school. She noticed the pile of papers scattered across the table and raised an eyebrow. "Grams, what are you doing?" she asked curiously, pulling up a chair. Dolores hesitated for a moment, unsure how to explain everything. Finally, she sighed and told her granddaughter the truth, from the school's financial troubles to the tech company's challenge, and how everyone had laughed at her for even trying. To her surprise, her granddaughter didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned forward, eyes wide with interest. "That's amazing, Grams. You're actually working on this?" Dolores nodded shyly. Encouraged by her reaction, she showed her granddaughter the progress she'd made so far. Together, they pored over the algorithm, discussing strategies and brainstorming solutions. Her granddaughter, who had grown up playing video games and tinkering with computers, offered fresh perspectives that Dolores hadn't considered. They stayed up late into the night, bouncing ideas off each other and debugging lines of code. As the days went by, their partnership grew stronger. Dolores marveled at how seamlessly they worked together, blending her mathematical expertise with her granddaughter's tech-savvy skills. For the first time in years, Dolores felt truly alive again. It was like reconnecting with a part of herself she'd long buried beneath layers of responsibility and routine. Every breakthrough brought a surge of excitement, every setback a lesson learned. And through it all, her granddaughter remained her biggest cheerleader, reminding her not to give up when things got tough. Meanwhile, whispers about Dolores continued to ripple through the school. Some students started noticing her unusual behavior, the way she carried notebooks everywhere, muttering calculations under her breath. Others saw her typing furiously on her phone during breaks. Rumors began circulating. Was the lunch lady really serious about this? Could she actually pull it off? A few teachers expressed mild curiosity, while others dismissed the whole thing as a waste of time. She's probably just making a fool of herself, one of them remarked dismissively. But Dolores didn't care what anyone thought anymore. She was too focused on the task at hand. With each passing day, the solution came into sharper focus. What had once seemed impossible now felt within reach. She knew there was still a lot of work to be done, but for the first time she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could succeed. By the end of the week, Dolores had transformed her initial sketches into a fully functional program. She ran simulations, tweaking variables and testing outcomes until she was confident. It worked perfectly. Exhaustion tugged at her, but satisfaction outweighed the fatigue. She looked at her granddaughter, who grinned back proudly. "We did it, Grams," the girl said, giving her a hug. Dolores smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in years. Little did she know, the hardest part was yet to come. Solving the algorithm was one thing, but proving herself to a room full of doubters was another challenge altogether. Still, Dolores was ready. She had faced adversity before and come out stronger. This time would be no different. The weekend before the big presentation, Dolores barely slept. Her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. She knew the algorithm worked, it had passed every test she'd thrown at it. But presenting it to a room full of experts and skeptics was an entirely different challenge. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about proving herself to people who had written her off without a second thought. On Monday morning, Dolores arrived at school earlier than usual. She tied on her apron and started preparing breakfast for the students, but her hands moved automatically, her focus elsewhere. Between serving trays of scrambled eggs and toast, she rehearsed what she would say during the presentation. She didn't want to sound rehearsed or robotic. She wanted to speak from the heart, to show everyone that this wasn't just some fluke. It was the result of years of untapped potential and sheer determination. Her granddaughter stopped by after class to check on her progress. "You've got this, Grams," she said, giving her a reassuring smile. "Just tell them your story. They'll see how much this means to you." Dolores nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She realized that her journey wasn't just about solving a math problem. It was about breaking down barriers and showing people that brilliance isn't confined to certain roles or titles. It could be found anywhere, even behind the counter of a high school cafeteria. As the day wore on, word spread that the tech company representatives were coming to review submissions later that week. Teachers huddled together during breaks, discussing their own attempts at the challenge. Some had put together elaborate presentations, complete with charts and graphs. Others admitted defeat and decided not to submit anything at all. Everyone seemed stressed, except for Dolores. While they fretted over PowerPoint slides and bullet points, she quietly finalized her program, double-checking every line of code. When Thursday finally arrived, the atmosphere in the school was electric. Representatives from the tech company filed into the auditorium, dressed in sharp suits and carrying laptops. They introduced themselves briefly before inviting each school to present its solution. One by one, teams took the stage, explaining their approaches with varying degrees of confidence. Some presentations were polished and professional, while others stumbled through technical jargon that left the audience confused. Principal Harris watched nervously from the back of the room, his foot tapping anxiously against the floor. Then, it was Jefferson High's turn. Principal Harris stood up and cleared his throat. Our school has, prepared something unique, he began awkwardly. He glanced toward the wings of the stage where Dolores stood waiting. For a brief moment, hesitation flickered across his face, but then he gestured for her to come forward. Here's our representative, he said, his tone uncertain, a ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd as Dolores stepped onto the stage. She carried nothing but a folder of handwritten notes and a USB drive containing her program. The contrast between her simple appearance and the sleek professionalism of the previous presenters couldn't have been starker. A few teachers exchanged skeptical glances while some students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even the tech company reps raised their eyebrows, clearly unimpressed, or so it seemed. Dolores took a deep breath and faced the audience. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as she began speaking, it grew steadier. I'm not a teacher or a computer scientist, she said, looking directly at the panel of judges. I'm the lunch lady here at Jefferson High, and when I heard about this challenge, I thought, why not give it a try? She paused, letting her words sink in. The room fell silent. She went on to explain how she approached the problem, breaking it down into manageable steps. She talked about the late nights spent teaching herself coding languages and the collaboration with her granddaughter. Her delivery wasn't flashy or overly technical, it was honest and heartfelt. She showed slides of her handwritten notes, pointing out key breakthroughs along the way. Then she plugged her USB drive into the laptop provided and demonstrated her program live. The screen lit up with colorful graphs and data streams, showing exactly how her algorithm solved the problem and improved efficiency by 30%. The transformation in the room was palpable. At first, the tech reps leaned back in their chairs, arms crossed, looking bored. But as Dolores walked them through her solution, their expressions changed. They sat up straighter, leaning forward to get a better look at the screen. One of them even whispered to another, "This is impressive." By the time Dolores finished her presentation, the entire auditorium was buzzing with energy. Principal Harris looked stunned. So did many of the teachers and students. No one expected her to pull it off like this, not with such clarity, confidence, and undeniable skill. As Dolores stepped off the stage, a group of students erupted into applause. Slowly, the rest of the room joined in, clapping louder and louder until the sound filled the auditorium. Dolores blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the unexpected support. Later that afternoon, the tech company announced the results. The tension in the room was almost unbearable as the head representative took the microphone. After careful consideration, he began, pausing dramatically, "We're pleased to announce that Jefferson High School has won the competition." The announcement was met with gasps and cheers. People jumped to their feet, shouting and clapping. Dolores stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. Then, Principal Harris rushed over and hugged her tightly, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine gratitude. As Dolores accepted the oversized check for $500,000, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions from the sidelines. But she barely noticed any of it. All she could think about was how far she'd come from being laughed at and dismissed to standing on stage as a hero. The weight of the moment hit her hard, and she had to fight back tears again. Back at school the next day, everything felt different. Teachers who had once mocked her now apologized profusely, shaking her hand and congratulating her. Students lined up to thank her, some even asking if she'd teach them math or programming. Dolores handled it all with grace, smiling warmly and brushing off the praise. It wasn't about me, she told anyone who would listen. It was about saving this school. For the first time in years, Jefferson High buzzed with hope and excitement. With the prize money secured, plans were already underway to renovate classrooms, hire new staff, and launch programs aimed at helping underprivileged students succeed. Dolores' victory became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places. But for Dolores, life returned to normal in many ways. She continued working as the lunch lady, serving meals and chatting with students. Only now, when someone asked, "Is it true you saved our school?" she'd smile, hand them a tray, and say, Sometimes the best solutions come from where you least expect them. The days following the announcement of Jefferson High's victory were a whirlwind for Dolores. The entire town seemed to rally around her, celebrating not just the school's win, but also the woman who had defied everyone's expectations. Local newspapers ran stories about her, calling her an unlikely hero and a hidden genius. Strangers stopped her on the street to congratulate her, some even asking for advice on how to tackle problems in their own lives. It was overwhelming at times, but Dolores handled it all with humility and grace. At school, things changed almost overnight. Teachers who had once dismissed her now treated her with newfound respect. Some even started seeking her input during staff meetings, asking for her opinion on challenges they faced. Students, too, began looking at her differently. Instead of seeing just the lunch lady, they saw someone who had accomplished something extraordinary. During lunch breaks, kids would gather around her station, peppering her with questions. "How did you learn to code?" one student asked curiously. Another chimed in, "Do you think I could do something like that someday?" Dolores always smiled warmly and encouraged them. "Of course you can," she'd say, handing them a tray of food. "You just have to believe in yourself and keep trying, no matter what anyone says." Her words carried weight because they came from experience. She wasn't just giving advice. She was sharing a piece of her journey, hoping to inspire others to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. With the prize money secured, Principal Harris wasted no time putting it to good use. Renovations began almost immediately. New paint covered the peeling walls. Broken desks were replaced, and outdated textbooks were swapped out for modern editions. The cafeteria got a makeover too, with shiny new equipment and brighter lighting. But perhaps the most exciting change was the launch of several new programs aimed at helping students succeed. A STEM lab was set up, offering hands-on learning opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and math. Tutoring sessions were organized for struggling students, and scholarships were created to help those who couldn't afford college. Dolores played a key role in shaping these initiatives. Though she didn't hold a formal position, her insights were invaluable. She worked closely with teachers to design practical lessons that combined real-world problem-solving with academic concepts. Her granddaughter, who had helped her solve the algorithm, became a mentor for younger students interested in coding. Together, they hosted workshops where kids learned the basics of programming while working on fun projects like building simple games or designing websites. Despite all the attention and accolades, Dolores remained grounded. She continued doing what she loved most, serving meals and connecting with students. To her, the cafeteria wasn't just a place to eat. It was a space where people came together, shared stories, and built relationships. Over trays of macaroni and cheese or slices of pizza, she listened to their hopes, fears, and dreams. Sometimes she offered advice. Other times, she simply provided a listening ear. Either way, she made sure every student felt seen and valued. One day, as she was cleaning up after lunch, a shy freshman approached her. The boy fidgeted nervously, clutching his backpack straps. "Miss Thompson," he began hesitantly, "I heard about what you did. Solving that big problem and everything. I want to do something amazing like that too, but—" His voice trailed off, and he looked down at his shoes. Dolores put down her mop and knelt to meet his gaze. "But what?" she prompted gently. "I'm not smart enough," he admitted quietly. "Everyone says I'm not good at math." She smiled kindly and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let me tell you something," she said. "When I was your age, people told me I was special because I was good at numbers. But life doesn't always go the way you plan, and sometimes you have to put your dreams on hold. What matters is that you don't give up on yourself. If there's something you really want, you'll find a way to make it happen. Trust me, I know." The boy nodded slowly, a flicker of hope sparking in his eyes. "Thanks, Miss Thompson," he said before walking away. Dolores watched him go, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Moments like these reminded her why she'd taken on the challenge in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but to show others that they were capable of more than they realized. As weeks turned into months, Jefferson High transformed into a thriving hub of activity. Enrollment increased as families moved to the area specifically to enroll their children in the newly improved school. Alumni who had long since graduated returned to visit, marveling at how far the institution had come. The community rallied behind the school, volunteering time and resources to ensure its continued success. Even local businesses pitched in, sponsoring events and donating supplies. Through it all, Dolores stayed true to herself. She declined offers to leave her job and pursue higher-paying opportunities elsewhere. "This is where I belong," she told Principal Harris when he suggested she might enjoy teaching instead. "These kids need me here, serving meals and cheering them on. Besides," she added with a wink, "who else is going to keep this cafeteria running smoothly?" Her decision earned her even more admiration. People respected her for choosing purpose over prestige, for staying rooted in the place where she felt she could make the biggest difference. In fact, the school decided to honor her in a special way. At the end of the year, they held a ceremony to rename the cafeteria the Dolores Thompson Dining Hall. When Principal Harris unveiled the plaque bearing her name, the entire student body erupted into applause. Dolores stood on stage, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the love and gratitude surrounding her. But the impact of her story extended far beyond Jefferson High. News of her achievements spread across the country, inspiring countless individuals to rethink their assumptions about potential and capability. Articles were written, podcasts recorded, and interviews conducted, all highlighting the remarkable journey of a woman who had proven that brilliance knows no bounds. Schools in other districts reached out, asking if she'd be willing to speak at conferences or mentor educators, looking to foster similar transformations in their communities. Though Dolores initially shied away from the spotlight, she eventually agreed to share her story. She traveled to nearby towns, speaking at schools and community centers. Her talks weren't flashy or overly rehearsed, they were heartfelt and relatable. She spoke candidly about her struggles, her doubts, and her ultimate triumph. And always, she ended with the same message: don't let anyone tell you what you're capable of. You have greatness inside you, you just have to believe it. By the time she returned home from one of these trips, Dolores felt a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that her victory wasn't just about saving a single school, it was about igniting a spark of possibility in others. Everywhere she went, she met people inspired to push past their limitations and strive for excellence. Whether it was a young girl dreaming of becoming an engineer or a retired man picking up painting for the first time, her story resonated deeply. Back at Jefferson High, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The renovations were complete, the new programs were thriving, and the hallways buzzed with energy. Students walked taller, proud to attend a school that had overcome such incredible odds. Teachers taught with renewed passion, knowing their efforts contributed to something meaningful. And Dolores? She kept doing what she did best, feeding bodies and nourishing souls. Every now and then, a curious student would approach her during lunch, pointing to the plaque on the wall. "Is it true you saved our school?" they'd ask, wide-eyed with wonder. Dolores would chuckle softly, hand them a tray, and reply, "Sometimes the best solutions come from where you least expect them." Then, with a wink and a smile, she'd turn back to her work, content in the knowledge that she had made a lasting difference not just in her community, but in the hearts and minds of everyone whose life she touched. The years rolled by, and Dolores continued to serve meals at Jefferson High with the same warmth and dedication she'd always shown. The school thrived under its newfound momentum, becoming a beacon of hope in the community. But Dolores' influence stretched far beyond the walls of the cafeteria. Her story became a part of the town's identity, a reminder that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places. Every morning, as she tied on her apron and prepared trays of food, Dolores couldn't help but smile at how much had changed. The once dingy cafeteria was now bright and welcoming, filled with laughter and chatter. Students no longer saw it as just a place to grab lunch. It had become a space where connections were made and dreams took root. Teachers often stopped by during their breaks, not just for coffee but to share stories or seek advice. And every so often a former student would walk in, grown up and full of gratitude, eager to thank her for the role she'd played in their lives. One such visit came on a crisp autumn afternoon. Dolores was wiping down tables when a young man stepped into the cafeteria. He looked familiar, though she couldn't quite place him at first. Then he smiled, and it clicked he was one of the shy freshmen who used to sit alone, quietly eating his sandwich while reading books about robotics. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I wanted to come back and say thank you." Dolores set down her cloth and gave him her full attention. "Thank me for what?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "For believing in me," he replied. "Do you remember telling me I could do something amazing if I didn't give up? Well, I did it." He went on to explain that he'd graduated top of his class, earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, and was now working as an engineer at a tech company. "I wouldn't be here without your encouragement," he added softly. "You showed me that it's okay to dream big, even when people doubt you." Tears welled up in Dolores' eyes as she listened. She reached out and hugged him tightly, feeling immense pride swell in her chest. These moments, the ones where she saw the ripple effect of her actions, were what kept her going. It wasn't about the awards or recognition. It was about knowing she'd made a difference, however small, in someone's life. As word of her impact spread, invitations poured in from all over the country. Schools, conferences, and community organizations wanted her to speak about resilience, determination, and the importance of believing in oneself. At first, Dolores hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her strong suit, and she worried she might fumble her words or fail to convey her message properly. But her granddaughter encouraged her, reminding her that her authenticity was her greatest strength. So, Dolores began traveling, sharing her story with audiences large and small. Her talks were never polished or rehearsed. They were raw and honest, like sitting down with an old friend over a cup of tea. She spoke about her childhood, her love for math, and the difficult choices she'd faced as a young mother. She talked about the years she spent working behind the scenes, quietly supporting others while putting her own dreams aside. And she ended each talk with a simple yet powerful message. Don't let anyone define your worth. You are capable of more than you know. Her speeches resonated deeply with listeners. People left inspired, vowing to pursue their passions despite obstacles. A middle-aged woman told her she'd decided to go back to school after hearing Dolores' story. A teenager confessed he'd been thinking of dropping out, but now felt motivated to stick it out. Even seasoned professionals approached her, saying her words had reignited their drive to innovate and push boundaries. Back home, Dolores remained a pillar of support for Jefferson High. Though she occasionally traveled, her heart belonged to the school and the students who relied on her. She continued mentoring kids in the STEM lab, helping them tackle complex problems and build confidence in their abilities. Some of them went on to win science fairs or secure internships at local companies. Others simply gained a newfound appreciation for learning, thanks to her patient guidance. One day, as she walked through the halls, she noticed a group of students gathered around a bulletin board. They were discussing a poster advertising a national coding competition. "We should enter this," one of them said excitedly. Another nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and we could ask Miss Thompson to help us?" Dolores chuckled to herself, touched by their enthusiasm. She joined them, offering tips and encouragement, watching as their ideas took shape. When the day of the competition arrived, Dolores accompanied the team to the event. As they worked tirelessly on their project, she sat nearby, cheering them on. When the results were announced and they placed second, the entire group erupted into cheers. One of the students turned to her, grinning ear to ear. "This is all because of you, Miss Thompson," he said. Dolores shook her head, brushing off the praise. "No, it's because of you," she corrected gently. "I just gave you a little push. The rest was all your hard work." By the time Dolores reached retirement age, Jefferson High had transformed into a model institution. Enrollment was higher than ever, test scores had improved significantly, and the graduation rate soared. The STEM lab she'd helped create became a breeding ground for innovation, producing students who went on to make meaningful contributions in various fields. The school district even named an annual award after her, the Dolores Thompson Spirit of Resilience Award, given to individuals who demonstrated extraordinary perseverance and determination. On her last day at the school, the entire community came together to celebrate her legacy. Students decorated the cafeteria with banners and balloons, and teachers organized a surprise party complete with cake and heartfelt speeches. Principal Harris presented her with a scrapbook filled with photos, letters, and mementos from over the years. Flipping through its pages, Dolores laughed and cried, overwhelmed by the love surrounding her, but retirement didn't mean slowing down for Dolores. She continued volunteering at local schools, mentoring young people, and speaking at events whenever she was invited. Her story became a staple in classrooms across the nation, taught as an example of grit and humility. Textbooks featured her journey alongside other trailblazers, ensuring that future generations would learn about the lunch lady who solved the impossible. Years later, as Dolores sat on her porch watching the sunset, she reflected on her life. She thought about the challenges she'd faced, the doubts she'd overcome, and the countless lives she'd touched along the way. She realized that her greatest achievement wasn't solving an algorithm or winning a competition. It was proving that everyone has value, regardless of their title or background, and as she sipped her tea, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood coming alive with laughter and conversation, she knew she'd done exactly what she set out to do, leave the world a little better than she'd found it.